My name is Charlotte. I'm 29, eating lunch at my desk. An email loads. Then a notification. Dad's name fills my screen. For half a second, I hope. Maybe he's checking in. Maybe about my promotion. The message opens, clean and cold. We've chosen to sever all contact. Stay away from us forever. Another buzz. Madison liked the text. A bright, stupid thumbs up. My sandwich tastes like metal. Fluorescence hum. Reheated fish stings the air. My hands stop shaking. I type without overthinking. I'll remove my name from every loan tomorrow. Send. I silence the chat. I finish lunch. I go back to work. They severed me by message. I severed the money. Ever had family cut you off by text? Tell me below. I woke before dawn. Coffee. Notebook. Laptop. My quiet arsenal lined across the table like weapons. The apartment was still dark. The city half asleep. I sat in that silence where decisions echo. I'd said I'd remove my name. Now I meant it. You can't just erase your name, the banker warned. Then trigger whatever removes it, I said. Her silence told me everything. Refinance or sell. Those were the only doors. If Dad couldn't qualify, the house would list itself in loss. Next, the truck lease. Certified notice drafted, mailed before noon. 30 to 60 days for review, the finance manager said. No guarantor, no truck. Simple math, finally in my favor. By lunch, my legal pad was full of names and numbers. Mortgage, truck, Madison's car, Mom's kitchen loan. Every debt I'd carried like a bloodline. I paused to breathe. The coffee had gone cold, bitter. But clarity burned hotter than caffeine. Madison's car came next. Title and insurance in my name. Legally, it was mine. I'd been paying for her independence for years. Now I was repossessing my sanity. Then Mom's renovation loan. $20,000 borrowed for her credit's sake. 3 payments made, then excuses. I paused the rest. Let collections call me, not control me. The list looked brutal in ink. Every signature a scar I was finally suturing closed. They'd called me selfish for saying no, ungrateful for wanting distance, vindictive for choosing fairness. What they never called me was free. If I'm banished, my signature leaves with me. By the next morning, I'd memorized the list. Every number, every signature that tied me to them. Madison's car was first. Technically mine, title, insurance, registration. She just drove it like it was earned. I waited until her shift started. Mom and Dad both at work. Suburbia still under pale spring light. I parked down the street, key in hand. The driveway looked the same. Trimmed hedges, porch flags. Only I'd changed. Her white car gleamed in the driveway. I unlocked it, slid inside, and turned the key. The engine started on the first turn. Fast food wrappers on the floor. Old fries and cheap perfume. Glitter ground into the mats. I reversed out of the driveway. No one stopped me. No one noticed. It felt like theft. It wasn't. At my apartment, I parked and stared at it. I'd taken back something with my name on it. I sent one message to the family chat. Vehicle recovered. Madison can arrange other transportation. Then I silenced the thread. By the time I returned from my workout, my phone flooded. Hundreds of messages, missed calls, voicemails. Mom crying. Dad furious. Madison raging through text bubbles. Uncle Tim preaching forgiveness. Aunt Laura sending prayer hands. Cousin Derek diagnosing me from Facebook. Everyone outraged. Not by what they'd done, but by what I'd stopped doing. I set the keys on the counter, hands still buzzing. I opened my folder. Titles, statements, screenshots. Proof I hadn't imagined any of it. For a second, I feared they'd call police. Title was in my name. Fear left. I wrote today's date in a spiral notebook. Documented times, calls, messages, steps, a record for the future me. In the courtyard, sprinklers hissed. The air smelled like wet soil and soap. The courtyard stayed ordinary. I showered, changed into soft clothes, brewed tea. I watched steam rise and breathed steadily. Grandma Ruth called around 9. Her tone was calm, deliberate. I told your mother I'd hear your side first. I almost cried. I told her everything. The loans, the lies, the text that exiled me. She paused. When your mother was young, she said. She borrowed $5,000 from us. Never paid it back. Said she thought it was a gift. Another pause. Some people think love means endless rescue. You're right to stop drowning for them. Her voice wavered once, then steadied. You remind me of your grandfather. He believed in earning peace. When the call ended, I sat in the dark. The car keys cooled in my palm. Freedom didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean, like air after rain. Sometimes taking back what's yours looks like betrayal. Until you remember who betrayed first. The next morning began with noise. Pings stacked like hail on glass. Mom's voicemails braided guilt with scripture. Dad's texts threatened lawyers and police. Madison went public. A Facebook note titled, "My Truth." I read it once, jaw tight. I was jealous, controlling, vindictive apparently. Her friends applauded in heart emojis. A former coworker commented cautiously, "Didn't Charlotte pay for that car?" The comment vanished in minutes. So did the coworker. My phone buzzed again, relentless. Screenshots from cousins I barely knew. Hashtags about narcissists and betrayal. I locked my accounts. Changed passwords. Turned off read receipts. Then I opened the evidence folder. Mortgage statements, lease contracts, loan terms, dates, amounts, signatures that matched mine. I took photographs of everything. Saved copies to 2 drives. Emailed myself a compressed archive. Dad's message finally arrived. A photo of letterhead, not a letter. "Expect consequences," he wrote. I forwarded it to Lauren. She replied in 6 minutes. "Bluff, keep documentation immaculate." I made tea. Peace arrived, carefully. At noon, Grandma Ruth called again. "I've slept on it," she said. "I'm updating my will this week." I gripped the counter edge. "Grandma, you don't need to—" "I do," she said. "Your mother confuses love with access." Her voice softened, not weak. "You confuse love with obligation. Stop doing that." Something steady clicked inside. A permission I didn't know I needed. I scheduled a therapy intake. Thursday 4 p.m. recurring. I added it to my calendar. I set an alert. Madison posted a story at sunset. Shaky voice, tragic lighting, practiced tears. "Family should help, not punish," she said. I didn't reply. I folded laundry instead. Shirts, socks, a soft towel. The door buzzer startled me. A courier, small envelope, my name. Inside, a typed demand. "Return the vehicle immediately." Threats in bold, signatures missing. I smiled without humor. I emailed my response in 3 lines. Title attached, insurance attached. Your move. Lauren texted a thumbs up. "One more thing," she wrote. "Start a written log. Every contact, every threat, every expense." I opened a fresh document. Typed the date and time. The list grew like a spine. That night, the chat burned hotter. Uncle Tim proposed mediation. Aunt Laura organized a prayer chain. Cousin Derek sent a sermon video. I muted his number permanently. Before bed, I stood by the window. The city kept moving, unbothered. Somewhere, a siren passed and faded. My life felt smaller and cleaner. Not empty. Measured. I set my phone face down. I turned off every notification. Quiet arrived like a rightful tenant. I slept. For the first time in months, I didn't dream of drowning. They broadcast a saga. I kept a record and claimed my peace. The house hit the market in June. I didn't visit once. Agents staged fruit bowls and white towels. I signed digitally and moved on. Dad applied to refinance a loan. He was denied, twice. The lender emailed the next steps. Sale required. Timeline attached. I forwarded it to my lawyer. An offer arrived after 6 showings. Good school district. Clean inspection. Closing in 30 days. At the signing, I kept my camera off. Wire confirmation landed that afternoon. After the mortgage and fees, equity remained. My portion, $20,000. I saved the receipt. Dad texted one line. "You're a vulture." I archived it for records. The truck lease resolved itself. Dealership demanded a new guarantor or return. He found a coworker willing to co-sign. I mailed my release letter anyway. File updated, liability removed. Madison's car stayed in my spot. I changed the insurance and plates. Maintenance on schedule, finally. No glitter on the mats. Mom's kitchen loan kept humming in my head. $20,000 borrowed in my name. 3 payments from her, then silence. I stopped paying last winter. The score dipped. 60 points. I let it. Collections called 6 months later. Balance swollen with fees. 13,000, they said. I negotiated a settlement. 5,000, single payment, deletion in writing. They agreed. I paid and filed the letter. My totals were simple. 9,000 already paid. 5,000 to settle. 14 on 20. A wound closed with a scar. Work noticed the shift. I stayed late for deliverables, not disasters. I mentored the new hires. My manager scheduled a one-on-one. "You've stepped up," she said. "Clients ask for you by name. Promotion in 3 months. Senior title, 15% raise." I rerouted the difference to savings. Madison's posts turned louder, then sadder. Rants about toxic people. Screenshots of devotionals between ads. A former coworker commented again. "Didn't your sister pay for everything?" The comment disappeared. So did the account. I didn't chase narratives online. I kept mine on paper. Dates, amounts, outcomes, next steps. Grandma Ruth visited in August. Small suitcase, firm hug, clear eyes. She brought a card and a check. For your buffer, she said. Not your burden. We ate lunch by the window. She asked about work, the condo search. I answered without flinching. On the way out, she paused. Proud of you, she said. Not for fighting. For stopping the rescue. That night I opened the bankruptcy folder. Not mine. Theirs. Public records listed filings in our county. Names I recognized, not surprised. They had chosen consequences over change. I closed the tab and breathed slowly. I wasn't their insurer anymore. Or their understudy. I washed the dishes and wiped the counter. The apartment stayed tidy and quiet. Bills paid, calendar light, inbox manageable. Freedom looked like Tuesday. They wanted my credit. I kept my future. I toured condos with a steady heartbeat. No one else on the paperwork. A one-bedroom faced a green park. Morning light insisted through tall windows. The lender approved my file quickly. Clean history, clean math, clean boundaries. On closing day, I signed a loan. My name filled every page confidently. Keys landed in my palm. Not heavy. Final. I moved with help from friends. Pizza, blankets, jokes about adulthood. We built shelves and laughed easily. Grandma Ruth visited the next weekend. Small suitcase, bigger smile, clear eyes. She brought soup and stories. I updated the will, she said. Your mother gets modest help. You get the rest. I started to protest. She raised a hand, gentle. Receive care without arguing it away. Work stayed steady, not frantic. Deadlines met, weekends mine again. I bought a used bicycle. I went to therapy Thursdays. We named losses without dramatics. We practiced quiet joy. Sometimes I reread Dad's message. Stay away from us forever. It doesn't burn anymore. It glows like an exit sign. Madison kept posting, I stopped checking. Narratives need audiences. Mine moved out. At dusk, I walked the park loop. Kids biked the path. The park exhaled. A text pinged from someone new. Kind. Patient. Plans for Saturday. I said yes without calculating rescue. I liked the version of me answering. That night I opened the balcony door. City noise braided with summer air. I watered plants that finally lived. Peace wasn't a ceremony. It was a practice. Bills set to autopay. Phone on silent. Locks clicked. Windows open. If you've chosen boundaries over approval, I'm proud of you. Tell me what you kept, and what you finally released. I removed my name from their loans, and from their story.
The violins were still playing when my daughter leaned in and said, "Mom, we need to go. Now." I remember the way her fingers gripped my wrist, not dramatic, not panicked, but firm, final. Her eyes were steady, trained on something behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't ask questions. I just blinked at her, confused by the quiet urgency in her voice. It was my parents' 40th anniversary party. There were candles floating in glass bowls, white roses spilling over gold-rimmed vases, crystal chandeliers catching every bit of light above the country club ballroom. It was the kind of evening they had always loved, elegant, rehearsed, admired. The kind of event where image wasn't just everything, it was the only thing. But my daughter, Lily Harper, 16 and sharp-eyed, wasn't looking at the roses or the chandeliers. She was watching people. And in that moment, she saw something I hadn't. If you've lived long enough, you learn that betrayal doesn't always come in slammed doors or shouted words. Sometimes it walks in wearing a tuxedo and offers you champagne. My name is Claire Harper. I'm 34. Divorced, 2 kids, freelance designer. Some days I sell handmade cards online to keep the lights on. Other days I teach beginner watercolor to retirees at the community center. Not the kind of life my parents ever imagined for their only daughter. My parents are Charles and Evelyn Whitmore Chuck and Evie to their friends. To me, they've always been something between royalty and employers. My father built a real estate empire. My mother curated the image that went with it. Nothing in our household growing up was accidental, not my piano lessons, not my posture, not the man I married. I spent most of my 20s believing I had finally done it right when I married Andrew Sinclair, the son of one of Dad's business partners. Drew was polished, ambitious, and utterly fluent in my parents' language of status. They adored him, even when he started pulling away, even when he began correcting my tone in front of guests, even when he came home late and smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. I found out about the affair with his assistant Kayla, 25, and sharp as a knife a year ago. The divorce was cold and expensive. He moved into a condo downtown. I moved with Lily and my 8-year-old son Jake into a modest rental with cracked linoleum and a view of the neighbor's trampoline. I thought that would be the hard part starting over. I didn't realize the harder part would be deciding who was still my family. To my surprise, my parents called more. They invited us to Sunday dinner. They dropped off gifts for Jake's birthday. They offered to help. It felt like they were choosing me finally. Not Drew, not Image, me. But Lily wasn't convinced. "They're trying to fix you," she said one night while doing homework at the kitchen table. "Like you're something they can patch up and put back into their narrative." I laughed, trying not to let her words land. "They're showing love the way they know how." She looked at me and said nothing. That was worse than any argument. Jake, on the other hand, lit up when they visited. My father took him to baseball games, slipped him $100 bills for candy, and books told him stories about when you take over the family business someday. My mother beamed at him with the kind of pride I used to try and earn. When the gold-embossed invitation to the anniversary party arrived, I felt hope again. A grand affair at the Oak Ridge Country Club. Maybe this was it, rebuilding, reclaiming, being seen. I spent weeks helping my mother with the guest list. I altered a dress from before the divorce because I couldn't afford a new one. I even made a photo album of their 40 years together curated with care. Lily watched me glue captions onto pages with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "Because family shows up," I said more to myself than to her. What I didn't know then, what she was already starting to suspect, was that showing up doesn't mean you're welcome. And sometimes the people who raised you are the same ones planning to quietly remove you from the story. The day of the party bloomed like a postcard. Early June sun stretched across the lawn of the Oak Ridge Country Club, casting everything in that forgiving golden light my mother always said was perfect for photos. I helped Lily with her hair. She resisted the emerald green dress my mother had sent. "It's not me," she muttered, but eventually gave in with a sigh. "Just for a few hours," I promised. "It'll make Grandma happy." She didn't answer, just stared at herself in the mirror like she already knew what I didn't. We arrived a little past 6. The lobby was transformed, white roses everywhere, string quartet in the corner, champagne flutes already in motion. I took a breath and adjusted my dress. My parents stood near the entrance like visiting royalty. My father, Charles Whitmore, in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother, Evelyn, radiant in silver beading. Her smile stretched wide as she kissed the air near my cheeks. "Claire, darling, you look comfortable. And Lily, what a color on you. I knew emerald would bring out your eyes. Her compliments always felt like subtle edits." Jake had barely stepped in before my father swept him up with exaggerated joy. "There's my boy, special seat for you right next to Grandpa tonight, head table." No mention of Lily. Barely a glance at me, but I swallowed it. This was their night. The ballroom filled quickly. Faces I half recognized from golf tournaments and charity auctions. Old business partners, second wives, third cousins. I smiled through rehearsed conversations, shaking hands and accepting sympathy for the divorce as if I were accepting awards. "It's been hard, but we're adjusting. The kids are resilient. No, I'm not dating." Then I saw them. Near the door. Andrew Drew Sinclair, my ex-husband, looking freshly pressed in a navy suit. Kayla, the reason for the divorce, stood beside him like she owned the room. My stomach dropped. I turned to my sister-in-law Rachel and whispered, "Did you know they were coming?" She looked away. "Your mother sent them a personal invitation." "I assumed you knew." Of course she had. My parents greeted Drew and Kayla like long-lost heirs, hugging, laughing, complimenting her dress. When my eyes finally met my mother's across the room, she gave a delicate shrug. "Bygones, darling. Drew's practically family." I retreated to the bar and let the ice in my glass keep me upright. Across the room, Lily stood still, her phone in her hand, watching everyone with narrowed eyes. She was texting, but not to friends. She was gathering something. And I, still caught in a fog of old instincts, chose not to ask. The night blurred into a stream of polite conversation and rehearsed smiles. Jake was glowing. He'd been moved to the seat between Grandpa and Drew, laughing like it was the best night of his life. Lily, though, hadn't touched her plate. I spotted her across the ballroom in quiet conversation with my Aunt Linda Evelyn's sister. They stopped talking when I approached. Smiles too quick. Eyes that didn't match their mouths. "Everything okay, I asked?" "Just catching up," Linda said lightly. Lily's quite the observer, she added too brightly. "We were discussing family history." Before I could press further, a chime rang out. My father raised his glass. The room hushed. 40 years ago, Chuck Whitmore began. "I made the best business decision of my life." Polite laughter. "Marriage, my friends, is about vision, legacy. Sometimes we must prioritize the future over temporary discomforts." His gaze skimmed across the room, rested briefly on Drew, then Jake, then me. Tonight, we're not just celebrating the past, we're securing the future. Glasses clinked. Applause followed. A few confused looks. I caught Lily's eye across the room. She wasn't confused. She was confirming something. I didn't know it yet, but my father hadn't thrown this party to honor the past. He'd orchestrated it to announce a future I had no place in. Dinner arrived like clockwork, perfectly plated, perfectly timed. I tried to enjoy it. I really did. The steak was tender, the wine was fine. But my mouth had gone dry. My father and Drew were leaning in close over Jake, whispering and laughing, their heads bent together like old business partners. Jake seemed to beam under the attention, his little shoulders squared like he belonged there. Lily, on the other hand, kept glancing at her phone, tapping beneath the table. She hadn't eaten a bite. Her jaw was set. I leaned in and whispered, "Are you okay?" She nodded. Too fast. From where I sat, I could see my mother showing Kayla yes. Kayla, the family jewelry that once had my name written on small paper tags in my mother's vanity. Emerald earrings, the pearl bracelet my grandmother wore at her own wedding. Evelyn touched Kayla's wrist and smiled the smile she used when she was about to replace something without asking. My seat, it turned out, wasn't next to Jake. It was closer to the corner, near distant cousins and business wives. When I approached the table earlier, there was no name card for me. "We didn't think you'd mind," Evelyn had said, glancing at the guest list as if it had slipped her mind. They had always been masters of subtle omission. After the entree, I stepped into the hallway to collect myself. As I turned the corner, I nearly collided with Aunt Linda again. She flinched. "Brooke's sorry, Claire. I've been meaning to talk to you alone." I blinked. No one had called me Brooke in years. That was the name I'd left behind with my marriage. "Something wrong?" Linda hesitated, lowering her voice. "I overheard your father and Drew earlier. They were talking about transferring assets. Something about restructuring for liability purposes. Your name came up, along with words like unreliable, unfit." The hallway swayed a little. I held onto the railing. "Richard Charles? He's always liked control," she added quickly. "But this feels different." Before I could ask more, my mother appeared cool and polished as ever. "Linda, the photographer, is waiting for the sister's photo." Linda offered a quick apology and vanished, leaving me with nothing but her warning. When I returned, Lily was gone. Jake now sat on Drew's lap, their faces close together over a phone screen, laughing at something I wasn't invited to see. Evelyn stood behind them, beaming at them, not me. "Where's Lily?" I asked. My mother sighed. "She's been moody lately. Said something about getting some air. Maybe check the terrace." I found her outside, back turned to the party phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, that's exactly what the document said. I need to know if that's even legal." She saw me and ended the call. "Mom, how's the party? Who were you talking to? Just..." "A friend." She tucked her phone away. Then, "Have you noticed how much time Grandpa is spending with Drew?" "They're probably talking business," I said, but the words came out thin. She studied my face. "Mom, when's the last time you looked in Grandpa's office?" I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Last time we visited, I needed a quiet place to study. Grandma told me to use it while Grandpa was golfing." She looked right at me. There were documents. About you. About Drew. Custody. Property. Red flags marking entire pages. A breeze picked up her hair. "You're more upset that I saw them than what they said." Before I could respond, the doors opened and servers began bringing out the cake. "Just watch them tonight," Lily whispered. "How they look at Drew. How they place Jake between them. How you don't appear in the slideshow." It hadn't started yet, but when the first image flashed across the screen, 40 years of love and legacy in gold script I already knew. The photos played Chuck and Evelyn on their honeymoon, business launches, children smiling, Brian and his wife, Drew holding Jake at last year's holiday brunch. I appeared once, maybe twice. Lily only in a distant group shot. My seat at their table had been removed, and now slowly they were erasing me from the story altogether. Fan 4. The plan to take it all. The moment we got in the car, Lily locked the doors. She didn't speak right away, just stared out the windshield while Jake in the back seat played with a light-up yo-yo someone had handed him at the party. 10 minutes passed in silence. Then, softly, "Pull over. Somewhere quiet." I did. We parked in an empty strip mall lot just outside a closed bakery. Streetlights hummed above us. Lily unlocked her phone and turned on the interior light. "I didn't just call a friend earlier," she said. "I called Aunt Sam." My throat tightened. "Samantha, that can't be right. She hasn't spoken to this family in 15 years. Lily nodded. "Because Grandpa did to her? Exactly what he's trying to do to you." She handed me the phone. Text messages. Dozens. Weeks long. "Sam, watch how he treats your brother compared to your mom. Has he started saying things like legacy or stability? That's code. Don't let them announce anything in public. It's a trap." I scrolled in disbelief. Each thread was a warning. All the pieces Lily had seen and I had missed. "Mom." I snuck into Grandpa's study during the party. I took pictures. She opened her gallery. I saw scanned copies of legal drafts, property transfer papers with Drew listed as custodial parent of Jake custody modification forms, with notes in my father's handwriting: Claire unstable, Art income unreliable, Ethan better off in structure, trust fund realignments naming Drew as trustee in event of unforeseen maternal absence. My hands trembled. I was holding proof, cold, calculated, and already in motion. Lily's voice wavered, but her eyes never left mine. "Grandpa doesn't want a daughter. He wants an heir. And Jake's the safest bet since I won't play by his rules." I felt a sickness rising in my stomach. "How do you even know what these documents mean?" She hesitated. "Aunt Sam's lawyer friend explained them to me. I sent over photos." She said, "What they're doing might not just be immoral, it could be illegal." That was when I realized how deep I'd been buried. How long I had wanted to believe my family wasn't capable of this. "I couldn't let you stay tonight," Lily said, voice low. "I think they were going to announce something, maybe that Drew was getting the house. Or that Jake would live with him. Something public, something binding. So you couldn't fight back without looking crazy." The words hit like ice in my lungs. Because I knew in my bones it was true. My parents hadn't just invited my ex to their anniversary. They had built the evening around him. "I'm so sorry you had to carry this alone," I whispered. I wanted to believe they finally accepted me." Lily shook her head. "They never did, Mom. They just accepted how well you hid your disappointment." She reached across and took my hand. "But you don't have to pretend anymore." We sat in the dark, mother and daughter, with one child sleeping and one secret broken open between us. I barely slept that night. After putting Jake to bed, I sat at the kitchen table while Lily sorted her photos and messages into a clean folder on her laptop. She moved with the quiet precision of someone who'd carried this weight far too long. By 6 a.m., I called my older brother Mark in Seattle. He didn't sound surprised. "I never liked what Dad and Drew were planning," he admitted after a pause. "I just didn't think they'd go this far." "You knew," I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "About the property, the trust Jake." Another pause, some of it. They said it was about tax strategy, keeping things clean. "I didn't know it meant cutting you out." He promised to forward every email, every message where Dad and Drew discussed family arrangements. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. By mid-morning, I had an appointment with Jennifer Morales, the lawyer Samantha had used all those years ago. Her office was quiet, nothing showy. Just rows of well-worn books and 2 chairs that didn't try to impress me. She read silently while Lily explained. Then she looked up and said, "They're counting on you being too ashamed, too overwhelmed, or too isolated to fight." "I'm not isolated anymore," I said. "I have my daughter. I have evidence, and I'm done being quiet." Jennifer outlined the first step file an emergency petition to freeze any property transfers involving the family trust and the deed to the house. Second, notify the court of potential custody manipulation. Third, document every interaction with Drew and my parents. I thought of Jake, how they held him between them like a future to be claimed. "They've been planting things in his head," I said, "about boarding school, about a real family legacy." Jennifer nodded. "That's called parental conditioning. Judges take it seriously, especially when one child is being groomed and the other she looked at Lily as being erased." Lily met her gaze without flinching. By the end of the meeting, the papers were filed. That night, I did something I never imagined I called my parents. My mother answered. "Claire," she said too evenly, "I was hoping you'd call to apologize." "I'm calling," I said, "but not to apologize." There was a pause. Then my father's voice joined hers on speaker. "This family has always handled things privately. You airing grievances after a party isn't the way." "What you did at that party wasn't family," I said. "It was ambush dressed as champagne." I told them what I knew, the documents, the audio, Samantha's testimony, Mark's messages. My voice never wavered. My father finally said, "You're being emotional, Claire. This is exactly why we worried, and this, I said, is exactly why you won't control my life anymore." Then Lily, who had been listening beside me, leaned in. "You underestimated the wrong generation, Grandpa." I ended the call. No threats, no pleading, just silence. And for once, I didn't feel it. 3 days after the call, I received a letter from my father's attorney, a warning dressed as formality. It stated that any unauthorized interference with Wallace family assets could be interpreted as a breach of agreement. The irony was staggering. I'd never signed a thing. Jennifer wasn't surprised. "They're testing your fear," she said, reviewing the letter. "That's how power works when it starts to lose control. It postures." The legal strategy continued. We filed a cease transfer order on the Victorian house. Jennifer submitted a request for family trust documents to be independently reviewed, and Lily compiled a meticulous record of everything: texts, recordings, time-stamped photos, emails from Mark. But the hardest part wasn't in courtrooms or offices. It was Jake. He'd grown quieter, more withdrawn since the party. He still cuddled up to me at night, still asked for one more story. But I could see it, that flicker of confusion in his eyes. And it broke something in me I didn't know was still whole. One afternoon, I overheard him tell Lily, "Grandpa says if I move in with Dad, I'll get a dog. And a bedroom with a telescope." He said it softly, like it was a secret he shouldn't carry. We started family therapy soon after. Not for conflict resolution, but for protection. For truth. The therapist, Dr. Alan Price, was a calm man with careful eyes. Jake fidgeted through the first session, twisting the sleeve of his shirt. Dr. Price asked, "Do you feel like the grown-ups are asking you to choose sides?" Jake nodded slowly. "They say Mom is busy, that she doesn't have time or money for the big things." I kept my face still. I didn't cry. That wasn't what Jake needed from me. "What are the big things?" Dr. Price asked gently. "Boarding school, trips, a real family name." The word real lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. Later that evening, Lily came into my room holding her laptop. "Mom," she said, "I found something. It was a financial trail. Payments made from my father's business account into Drew's private legal fund, timed exactly around the party. 1 week before, 1 day after. Each marked for custodial planning." Lily's hands shook as she scrolled. "They were paying to build a case," she said, "while we were smiling for photos." The thought struck me. Had they ever intended for me to show up to that party as anything but a placeholder? A box to tick before cutting me out completely was the dress my mother sent. A costume for the stage. When we told Jennifer, she nodded grimly. "This confirms financial collusion to interfere with custody," she said. "We're adding it to the motion." As the case built momentum, the reaction came swift and cold. My father stopped returning calls. My mother sent a short email. "We are heartbroken you've chosen to drag this into the public." I didn't respond. Not to that. Not when Drew showed up 2 weeks later with a proposal. We met in a coffee shop. I kept my phone visible on the table. "This isn't sustainable," he said, eyes flicking to the recorder. "The lawyers. The damage. Jake's in the middle of something ugly." "Then stop putting him there," I said. He tried to soften. Said he'd consider stepping back from the property deal if I agreed to a shared custody revision. Informal, flexible, beneficial. Beneficial to whom I asked. "To Ethan," he said. Then he corrected himself to Jake. That slip told me everything. He wasn't trying to win Jake's heart. He was trying to win legacy. "You don't get to write the ending, Drew," I said, standing up. "You're just in it." I left before he could answer. Outside, the air felt different. Crisper. Like something in me had finally settled. Still, the question lingered: if Drew was beginning to unravel, what would my parents do next? They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by the daughter they'd spent decades training to obey. 2 months after the anniversary party, Jennifer called. "It's time," she said. "They've stalled every motion they could, but with Lily's records, Brian's emails, and Drew's slip-ups, we have enough." The hearing wasn't public, not yet, but it was formal. And in that courtroom, everything my parents had protected with charm and silence began to show cracks. We presented the draft emails between my father and Drew about custodial restructuring, the financial transfers from Wallace Development labeled family strategy, voice recordings from the party including my father saying it's time Brooke stepped aside for the good of the Wallace name. Most damning of all was Lily's testimony. 16, calm, unflinching. She told the judge about the night on the terrace, the documents, the red flags. The moment she knew her family wasn't protecting her mother, they were erasing her. When asked why she got involved, she said, "Because I was the only one paying attention. And because she's my mom." Drew's team attempted to discredit her as emotionally influenced. Jennifer responded with a copy of his payment logs. If a teenager can uncover a legal conspiracy, she said maybe we should be listening to her instead of silencing her. Outside the courtroom, my mother didn't look at me. My father did. Just once. That old look disappointment mingled with disbelief, like he couldn't fathom how I'd learned to stand. "You could have come to us quietly," he muttered. "And you could have told the truth," I replied. For once, he had no answer. The judge's decision didn't strip them of their wealth or erase decades of control, but it did freeze the trust restructuring, protect Jake's current custody arrangement, and crucially barred Drew from assuming sole ownership of the Victorian house. The court appointed a neutral third-party trustee to oversee any future decisions involving family assets. It wasn't a victory parade, but it was enough. After the hearing, Brian called. I saw the filing. "You really did it." "I didn't do it alone," I said. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Lily, she's Dad's blind spot. He never saw her coming. For weeks after the Wallace house went quiet. No more emails, no more proposals disguised as family dinners. But silence didn't mean surrender. I stayed cautious. Documents stayed filed. Visitation stayed structured. And every conversation with Jake ended the same way: you are loved. Not for what you give, just for who you are." One morning, Lily knocked on my door, holding an envelope. "You might want to read this," she said. It was a letter from my mother, handwritten, careful cursive. Brooke families survive by tradition, but not all traditions deserve survival. I cannot undo what's been done, but I see now that silence is not the same as peace. Give Jake our love. Tell Lily. She was right. There was no apology, but there was an admission. That was more than I ever expected. That night, Lily and I sat on the porch. The summer air smelled like pine and rain. Jake slept upstairs hugging a toy fox Lily had bought him last Christmas. "Do you think they'll ever change?" she asked. "Maybe," I said, "but we don't have to wait for them to." She was quiet for a while, then smiled. You know, if this were a movie, this would be the part where we say something profound. Yeah, but I think the truth's better. Which part? That you didn't need saving Mom. You just needed someone to look you in the eye and say, I see it too. And that's what Lily gave me, a mirror that didn't distort. A daughter who stood where I'd once been at the edge of a lie and stepped back before it swallowed her. 6 months later, the Wallace family gathered again. Not at a country club, not for a celebration, but for a legal mediation, final arrangements on the trust, custody stipulations, and a permanent record of what had been attempted and what had failed. This time I came prepared. Jennifer beside me, Lily just behind. Jake stayed home drawing rockets and dinosaurs and pretending the world was still simple. My father opened with civility, polished, collected. We're here to avoid further fragmentation. My mother sat stiff, a silk scarf knotted tightly at her throat. She didn't speak. Their lawyer outlined the final revisions. My ownership of the Victorian house was affirmed irrevocably. The children's inheritance divided equally locked until age 25. No future trust or asset decisions would involve Drew without my written consent. Then came the clause about family access. Supervised, limited, conditional on documented respect for my parental decisions. My father read that line twice. So we're no longer grandparents. We're vetted visitors. Your family, Jennifer replied, just not immune to consequence. The documents were signed, no ceremony, no photographs, just the shuffle of papers, the scratch of pens, and the end of a lineage of control. On our way out, my mother finally spoke. You always were more like Samantha than I cared to admit. That used to be an insult, I replied. Now I take it as a compliment. She looked down, smoothed her gloves. Didn't deny it. Lily and I walked to the car in silence. In the parking lot, she paused. Do you feel anything tired? I said. But lighter. I didn't look back at the building. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer needed their version of closure. We drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like cut grass and faraway rain. When we walked in, Jake ran up holding a drawing. This one's for you, Mom, he said. It's us. In a rocket. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, he whispered. That night, after both kids were asleep, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on an empty document. I didn't write about pain, or betrayal, or legal battles. I wrote a grocery list. I looked up a family therapist for long-term support. I bookmarked a summer camp Lily might enjoy. I started life again not because I won, but because I finally stopped asking for permission. In the end, there was no apology big enough to fix what they'd broken. But there was something better. A daughter who saw through the lie, a son who still called me first, and a truth no longer buried under politeness and property. The last email I got from my father was short. You left us no choice. I never replied, because I finally understood I didn't need to explain why I walked away. The music didn't stop, but it faltered. A violin note trembled off-key just long enough for 200 guests to fall silent. My cheek stung. The taste of blood was sudden, sharp, metallic. Somewhere behind me, champagne flutes clinked against the marble floor. I didn't move. Not at first. My name is Elena Harper. I'm 30 years old. And 5 seconds ago, my father, Richard Harper, retired Marine and king of family pride, slapped me across the face at my brother's wedding. You selfish little girl, he hissed, his breath hot with bourbon and rage. After everything we've done for you, I turned to face him, feeling the slow swell forming on my lip. My mother, Marlene, had gone pale, her hands trembling, not out of concern for me, but for the scene we were making. She glanced sideways toward the head table where the photographers had frozen in place. I didn't bother answering him. I just looked past him over his shoulder to the reason we were here. My brother Nathan Harper, still in his tailored tux, seated beside his new wife, Callie. He didn't rise, didn't flinch. He was smirking. Of course he was. Minutes earlier, they had cornered me by the dessert table, my parents. Told me to hand over the penthouse. You're just one person, Elena Marlene had said, arranging a tray of cupcakes like it was any other day. Nathan and Callie need a place to build their life. Be reasonable. Reasonable. That's what they always called it when they took from me and gave to him. I told them no. Calmly, directly. I bought that place with my own money. I live there. Nathan and Callie can find something on their own. And now this. His handprint blooming across my face and my mother still more worried about what the neighbors might say. I blinked once, then smiled not out of grace or defiance, but out of clarity. You'll regret this, I said loud enough for the head table to hear. All of you will. Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom. My heels echoed like a gavel on tile, and nobody followed me. The cold hit me as I stepped outside, but I didn't shiver. I kept walking. Past the valets, past the floral arch my mother obsessed over for weeks, past the guests pretending not to look. My hands were steady, but something in me had shifted. Not broken, just settled. When I was 24, I started saving for that penthouse. 60-hour work weeks, no vacations, night shifts, weekends. I wrote back-end code for banks, then freelanced on the side building billing systems no one wanted to learn, but everyone wanted to own. I worked out of a tiny cafe on 5th called Juniper and Black Long Wooden Tables, a view of the harbor, and a barista named Mark, who never asked questions. That cafe became my refuge, my anchor. I made my down payment 3 years later. No help from anyone. Not from my father, who said I should be investing in a future with a man. Not from my mother, who called the place too cold, too modern, too far from the family. I moved in alone, furnished every corner with purpose. That penthouse was the first space that was truly mine. And Nathan. My brother had bounced through 5 business ideas by then. The last one involved drones and coffee delivery. The one before that, NFTs for dogs, I think. My parents bailed him out each time, quietly, relentlessly. He lived rent-free in a condo they owned, called himself Between Ventures, but somehow I was the one being selfish. They never noticed when I stopped showing up on holidays, when my texts turned one word short, when I politely turned down every Sunday dinner, every call that started with "we were thinking" and ended with "Nathan could use your help." They thought I was quiet because I had nothing to say. Truth is, I stayed quiet because I knew one day I'd need them to forget how much I'd learned while they weren't looking. I didn't drive home. The penthouse felt too loud with memory, too exposed. I couldn't face the silence it would offer me tonight. Instead, I took a left at the waterfront and pulled into the gravel lot behind Juniper and Black. The cafe was quiet this late, almost closing. A single bulb above the counter cast a golden hue over polished wood, and there was Mark drying glasses with the same quiet rhythm he always kept. Mid-30s, patient-eyed, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. He looked up as I entered, and for a second his face changed. Not surprise, concern. "You okay?" he asked, already reaching for the mug he always used for me. "My father slapped me," I said, walking slowly to my usual table by the window. "At my brother's wedding, because I wouldn't give them my penthouse." Mark didn't say anything at first. He just placed the mug down black coffee, 2 sugars, then added a chocolate muffin beside it. "On the house," he said. "You look like you need it." I sat there a long while staring out at the water. The reflection of the harbor lights flickered like someone was shaking the surface, and for the first time since the ballroom, my chest cracked open. But I didn't cry from hurt. I cried because I was furious. For years, I had done everything right, earned my place, asked for nothing. And this was my reward, being smacked in public because I refused to hand over what I built. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted an asset. Somewhere between the coffee cooling in front of me and the muffin untouched beside it, a new clarity settled. If they could take from me that easily, what would they try next? I opened my laptop. My hands didn't shake, and in the soft hum of the cafe, I began to plan. The next morning, the doorman called before I'd finished my coffee. "Ms. Harper, your parents are here." They weren't announced. Of course they weren't. I dressed with care, slacks, dark blouse hair pulled back. Clean lines, quiet power. When I opened the door to meet them in the hallway, my father was already pacing, jaw clenched. Richard Harper, former sergeant, still acting like the world owed him obedience. "Where are you going?" my mother asked, voice sharp beneath her pearls. "We need to talk about last night." "Work?" I replied, locking the door behind me. "Some of us actually have jobs. My father stepped in close, grabbing my arm. "Don't you take that tone. After your behavior yesterday, I pulled away calm as glass. Touch me again and I'll call security." He hesitated. "I didn't. There are cameras, you know, at the country club. High resolution, multiple angles." That stopped him. Marlene, usually so poised, paled visibly. "You wouldn't. Try me." I turned toward the elevator. "Oh, and change the locks if you want. It won't matter. Everything valuable is already in secure storage." As the doors slid shut between us, I watched them blink, not angry, confused. Like they were just now realizing I wasn't the same girl they used to corner in the kitchen and guilt into giving up weekends' money silence. This time, they didn't follow. And that was their first mistake. I didn't answer their calls. Not that day. Not the day after. At first, the messages were predictable. My mother tried guilt. "Elena, come back inside. You're embarrassing the family." Then Nathan, my brother, weighed in. "Don't be dramatic, sis. We can talk about this like adults." And then Callie. "He deserves that penthouse more than you. He's starting a family." I read each message once, then muted the thread and never replied. Instead, I drove back to Juniper and Black, ordered the same coffee, and claimed my usual seat. Mark gave me a silent nod. He didn't ask questions this time, just brought over my drink and left me to my screen. That afternoon, I opened 3 tabs, one for my lawyer, one for my financial advisor, one for a real estate listing I'd bookmarked 6 months ago but never pursued, a luxury oceanfront apartment complex called Hollow Shore Residences. It had been Nathan and Callie's latest obsession. They'd toured it in April, raved about the glass balconies and heated floors. They couldn't afford it, of course, but they'd been angling to rent one of the corner units, hoping my parents would co-sign. Now, I was making an offer on the entire building. By sunset, I'd submitted a formal bid backed by years of savings and 2 investment portfolios they didn't even know I had. That night, I pushed a major code update to a private GitHub repo, a property management platform I'd been quietly building in my spare time. The same idea Nathan once tried to borrow for his failed startup. By the time I closed my laptop, phase 1 was complete. They thought I was spiraling, that I'd come crawling back. But I wasn't unraveling. I was constructing, not revenge, not chaos, a boundary, made of brick fiber cable and legally binding contracts. They had wanted my home. I was about to show them what I really owned. 10 days passed in silence. Not true silence, there were still messages, still calls from blocked numbers and mutual friends with nervous voices. Nathan sent a cousin to check in. Callie posted vague jabs on social media about entitled people who don't support family. But I didn't respond. I was busy. By then, the offer on Hollow Shore Residences had been accepted. The paperwork was moving. My lawyer, Rachel Myers, efficient as ever, had flagged every clause. The complex would be mine within the month. But that wasn't the part that kept me up at night. The real rot was deeper. Years ago, when Nathan was launching his now-defunct crypto platform Oryx, he came to me for technical advice. He said he needed someone to look over his architecture. I offered help. I reviewed his documents, shared a few of my own interface mock-ups, assuming he just needed inspiration. He took them, rebranded them, built a front-facing system that was 80% my original code, untested, unsecure, and irresponsibly modified. When Oryx collapsed spectacularly last year, he claimed market volatility. But now that I'd gained access to a few of his old servers, he never changed his admin passwords, 'cause of course he didn't. I found more than bad coding. I found records, shell corporations, fake consulting invoices, large transfers to a familiar business name, Harper & Associates LLC, my father's side business. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd laundered investor money through my family's name. I called Rachel. If I file this with the SEC, it'll bring them both down. She was quiet a moment. "Do you want that? I want them to stop. I want them to understand I'm not afraid of them anymore." Then I sent one more email. To my mother. Subject line: "We should talk." She showed up the next morning, Marlene Harper pearls tight at the throat face, drawn tighter. She tried to open with tears. I let her. But when I turned my laptop toward her and showed her the financial records, she stopped mid-sentence. You don't understand." "No," I said, voice steady. You don't. Fraud isn't a mistake, and neither is raising a son who thinks stealing from family is strategy. Her hands trembled in her lap. I closed the laptop. We were just getting started. Marlene sat still for a long time. The tears had stopped. The softness she walked in with motherly grief, wounded dignity had vanished. What remained was calculation. She wasn't here to heal. She was here to contain. "What do you want, Elena?" she asked finally. Her voice was tight, not broken, controlled. "I want peace," I said. "No more calls, no more flying monkeys, no more social media updates from Callie about how I abandoned the family." She blinked. "The penthouse is mine. Legally, morally, factually. It's off limits. My finances, my work, my future off limits. And if we don't agree to that," I looked at her, then really looked, at the woman who had always chosen silence over truth, etiquette over protection, who taught me that being a daughter meant knowing when to give up what you loved quietly with a smile. I gave her none of that now. I have documents that show Dad's involvement in Nathan's fraud. I have server logs, payment trails, names, screenshots, and I have video of him slapping me in a public venue with witnesses. "You'd destroy your own family," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did that. When you told me to give up my home. When Dad raised his hand. When Nathan watched and smiled." Her face crumpled just slightly, like something inside her had shifted but not enough to reach her mouth. I closed the laptop gently. The sound echoed more than I expected. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable," I said, standing. "Just distance, just silence." She didn't respond. Just rose, gathered her purse, and walked out. I stood by the window for a long time after, watched her disappear into a black sedan. No slammed doors, no shouted names. Only quiet. And for once, it belonged to me. 1 week passed, then 2. I didn't hear from Marlene. Richard didn't call. Nathan didn't post. But the silence wasn't peace, it was pressure building behind a dam. The first crack came in an email from my real estate agent. Subject: eviction notice processed, Unit 14C. Nathan and Callie had stopped paying rent, 2 months delinquent, ignored notices, blamed a miscommunication with the leasing office. What they didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that I was the new owner. The name on their final notice was mine. I didn't gloat. I didn't interfere. I let the process unfold the way it was designed to. Quiet, legal, permanent. They moved out in silence. No Instagram photos, no long goodbye. Just one text from Nathan the night they left. "Mom told me what you're doing. You can't prove anything." I stared at the message for a while, then attached a screenshot server logs bearing his full name, time-stamped file access account IDs. I sent it without a word. His reply came minutes later. "What do you want?" I answered in 3 distance. Total distance. No more demands. No more guilt trips disguised as family dinners. No more pretending we were something we hadn't been in years. He tried one last time. "You've changed." I looked at the message, then wrote, "No." I just stopped pretending. Then I silenced the thread and archived the conversation. That night, I walked out onto the penthouse balcony. The city lights were soft, almost kind. I thought of how many years I'd spent trying to be good, useful enough. Now, I didn't need to be anything but free. They had tried to take my home and ended up losing their own. It was a Tuesday evening when the knock came. Not urgent, not angry, just hesitant. I checked the security camera. Richard Harper standing alone in the hallway, shoulders squared like habit, but his hands kept adjusting his jacket like he didn't know what to do with them. I could have ignored it. But curiosity won. I opened the door but didn't step aside. He looked older than I remembered. His jaw wasn't set like usual. His eyes didn't scan the room like he owned it. 5 minutes, he said. "That's all I'm asking." I said nothing, but I didn't close the door either. "They're moving back in with us," he said finally. "Nathan and Callie. Couldn't keep the apartment." "I know," I replied, voice flat. "I own the building." He blinked as if the sentence didn't compute. Then something behind his eyes gave way. "You," he said quietly. "But how?" "Because I'm good at what I do, Dad. I always was. You just never noticed." He looked down. The silence between us stretched, not hostile, not awkward, just real. Your mother misses you. We all do. No, I said. You miss having someone to push around, someone to sacrifice for Nathan. That person doesn't live here anymore. He nodded slowly. I was wrong, he said, about a lot of things. The slap, the way we treated you, covering for Nathan. I've lost everything because of it. It was true. After I showed Marlene what I had, Richard had stepped down from his company's board. The whispers in his circles had started, his clean record no longer clean. I didn't release anything I said. The threat was enough. He looked up, then really looked. You haven't lost everything I added. You still have your golden child. Isn't that what matters? He exhaled, shaky. We made mistakes. No, I said. You made choices. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Your mother wanted you to have this. It's an invitation, her birthday dinner. I took it but didn't open it. I'll think about it. And I closed the door. Not loud, not fast, but with finality. I held the envelope for 3 days before I opened it. No note. Just cream cardstock with my mother's handwriting, delicate cursive that always looked more like a performance than a signature. Please join us for Marlene Harper's 63rd birthday dinner. Family only. Family. I almost laughed, but I didn't throw it away. The night of the dinner, I arrived late. 15 minutes after everyone had already been seated. I wore black, not dramatic, not mourning, just neutral. Present, but untouchable. Nathan and Callie sat in the far corner, their clothes once designer, now department store simple. She didn't meet my eye. He barely looked up. My father, Richard, stayed sober. He nodded when I entered nothing more. My mother smiled too wide too quickly, as if the room might shatter if I didn't play along. But I didn't perform. I observed. No one asked me questions. No one gave me orders. And when I left early quietly without fanfare, no one followed me. A few months later, I hosted a dinner of my own. It wasn't in their home. It wasn't family only. It was on my balcony, my penthouse. There was wine, laughter, the sharp scent of roasted garlic and soft jazz playing low in the background. Mark came, of course. So did Rachel, my lawyer, and Jenna, the real estate agent who helped me secure the building. People who never expected me to give up pieces of myself just to earn space at their table. We toasted as the city lit up beneath us. To Elena, Mark said, raising his glass, who turned a slap into an empire. I smiled, not out of victory, but out of peace. Not silence, not surrender. Choice. They tried to take my home, but instead they gave me my freedom.